everybody? Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and you're not going to believe this. There's not horrendous news on the injury front that I'm coming to with you here tonight. Purple Insider live show here brought to you by FanDuel. As always, we'll get to the FanDuel question of the day. I actually have some emails that people have written to me that I want to get to because sometimes they can't join the live show. I get emails, DMs that have good thoughts that I want to make sure I answer, but I want to begin with this little guy in my email called an injury report here that when I opened it up and I read it over, I thought, I've seen worse recently. Of course, JJ McCarthy is not practicing, and I'll give you an update from what Kevin O'Connell said, along with some words from Carson Wentz, O'Connell on a couple of other subjects as well. Want to bring that to you, but let's go through this thing here first. So no JJ McCarthy, clearly. Ryan Kelly was not practicing today, and neither was Justin School, but Christian Darrisaw was practicing in full today, as we have gotten to full Darrisaw watch. And when is he going to come back? They desperately need him. I did have a good conversation with Walter Rouse today about how much he has grown over the last year or so, working behind Christian Darrisaw, and I think he's taken huge gains through the offseason, and he actually went in and played pretty well outside of the holding penalty. Thought that he stepped in, but it would be a tough task against Trey Hendrickson, who had 17 and a half sacks last season. Not exactly the guy that you would want your inexperienced tackle versus one of the best tackles in the NFL. So we know that. And once again, Kevin O'Connell was a little bit dodgy when it came to whether Christian Darrisaw is going to play. And I think through week by week, they're trying to figure it out by Friday themselves, where Darrisaw is at, how comfortable he feels. And that was brought up as well by O'Connell today as he was talking about Darrisaw. One line was kind of about just his feeling and where he's at. And I know that as the time goes on, we start to wonder more and more, like, was there a setback? I know O'Connell said that there wasn't, and he acknowledged that it's even been a little bit unique with sometimes he's limited, sometimes he's a full participant, and O'Connell has insisted that there is no foul play to that. But the fact that he is a full participant on the first day of the week, that means we've got eyes out for tomorrow. And if he's a full participant tomorrow, and if he's a full participant Friday, then the chances of Christian Darrisaw playing in this game continue to go up and up and up, and they could really, really use Darrisaw back. Also, Jeff Okudah practicing in full, coming off of his concussion. He did not play last week against Atlanta. They could have used him as a tackler, but aside from that, there wasn't a lot of passes that were thrown, as Atlanta mostly stuck to their ground game against the Vikings. They were in that position all day. So Okudah misses a game where they didn't necessarily need to be in a nickel package a lot, and now is trending toward coming back in a game where they likely will against a high-powered passing game in Cincinnati. I'm going to still call it that because they've got the receivers, and if you don't take Jake Browning seriously, he can sneak up on you as he did in 2021 to beat the Vikings late in that game. 2023. Sorry, 2021 was the opener against Cincinnati. 2023 was when he beat the Vikings late in that fourth quarter game. We most remember it for the failed tush push, but also there was the T. Higgins touchdown. They resolved some things about the Vikings defense late in that game, and Browning was able to execute. So they need every bit of help they could get in the secondary against this Cincinnati passing game. Also on the good news side, Andrew Van Ginkel practiced today, though he was limited, but still getting back out there after missing last week with the concussion. Harrison Smith still limited as he returns from the illness. Now, he said the other day when we spoke to him, this was last week, that the reason he didn't go on short-term IR was that he did not expect it to take 4 weeks for him to come back. Well, this is 3, and as far as I can remember, I don't think Harrison Smith has yet practiced fully, and it does get to a point where there is some concern there of like, how long is this going to go on for Harrison Smith? Is it going on longer than we expected it to? And they could really use him back. And I thought the tackling could have used him back the other night. The leadership, the calling of the defense, all of these things, Harrison Smith still can play a very big role. So limited is not necessarily what you want to see in the ramp up today. But overall, a lot of other guys that were limited: Grenard, Donovan Jackson, Theo Jackson, Josh Oliver. That's one to watch too, Josh Oliver, and whether he practices in full. Grenard with the oblique issue where he was down the other night. That's what happened to him. So some to watch, but it's not unusual to see guys being banged up after a game in the first practice that they have. So we'll have some eyes on those for the rest of the week. But the big one here, of course, is Christian Darrisaw practicing in full. And on the Cincinnati side, Shamar Stewart, their top draft pick, not practicing with an ankle injury. So there's that side of things. Also want to bring you what Kevin O'Connell had to say about JJ McCarthy, and then some other things about JJ and the situation.
Kevin, excuse me, a couple days later, do you have any more sense of the severity of JJ's ankle injury?
Yeah, he's responding well early on to treatment and things, and he's in a boot and kind of letting that thing settle down when he's not getting treatment. Still heavily involved in meetings and installs and everything. Had great energy and enthusiasm to kind of attack it in any way he can for now, and that'll be able to build and progress from there. But yeah, he's still in the early stages of it as he kind of, I know, from a standpoint of some of the things we were hoping early on, we've seen some of that, and it'll continue hopefully.
So a little bit on the generic side from Kevin O'Connell there, but I'm going to mention something that I don't want to be like overblown, but just part of what I do is to try to ask people about whatever it might be going on with the Vikings and see what I can ascertain, right? And my feeling about this injury that JJ McCarthy sustained is that just because Adam Schefter put out the 2 to 4 weeks timeline doesn't lock that in, because the recovery is not a absolute guarantee. It's always this many weeks to this many weeks. That's how it works 100% of the time. Every high ankle sprain is its own snowflake, and it is possible that JJ McCarthy could be healed up enough for them to consider him to play next week. It might depend on a lot of things. I mean, it depends on how he heals up throughout this week. If he's still in the walking boot, that is a little bit maybe behind where you'd like him to be, not necessarily like at this moment, but if he was going to come back next week. But it is a possibility if that thing heals up, if it responds really well, that he could be good to go. It's also possible that Carson Wentz, if he goes out there against the Cincinnati Bengals and throws for 320 yards, looks awesome in the offense, then they would be a little more on the cautious side. And it might depend on what Carson Wentz does in this game if you get JJ McCarthy back next week, 2 weeks from now. So it's the healing, but it's also, I think the Carson Wentz performance will make a difference here. If Wentz plays average football and they barely win against the Bengals, let's say that it's 17-14, he throws for 168 yards on 28 passes or something like that, then I think that they'll consider getting JJ McCarthy back out there as fast as possible. But this team knows that there's a realistic scenario where a quarterback who everyone had kind of left for dead shows up with the Minnesota Vikings and Justin Jefferson and Kevin O'Connell, and then has it click in and performs very well. And considering that JJ McCarthy did not look like he is locked in the speed of the game yet, I think that he understands where he's supposed to go with the football. I think that he has the fight in him. He has the leadership in him. I think we've seen that. He's not going to give up. He's going to fight through an injury that he's dealing with late in the game and all those types of things. But when you have one of the slowest snap to release times, even when some of the stuff, when you go back and look at it on tape, was supposed to get out pretty quickly, and you're having protection issues, it is a bit of a powder keg for a young quarterback. Also, I would like to see JJ McCarthy with Christian Darrisaw back out there, but if Carson Wentz ends up with the benefit of Christian Darrisaw, he might perform pretty well. And then the benefit of Jordan Addison coming back, and there's a chance that they get rolling, and then the decision becomes a little bit more complex. But just in asking around a little bit, this is one of those injuries that is very hard to pin down for somebody just saying, hey, it's 2 to 4 weeks. But it might not be that long, or it could end up that Carson Wentz plays well and he does not end up relinquishing the job. I mean, here in Vikings land, you just never really know when it comes to quarterbacks. But I wouldn't 1,000% count out the idea that he could heal up quickly just because that was the initial report. Like, these things are a moving target, kind of put it that way. I know that's not the most definitive report, but that's what I got for you, is that it's not always with a high ankle sprain, just it's this many weeks and that's how it is, and black and white. It can be a little bit different than that. So it'll be something to track and monitor as we go on. So as it pertains to Carson Wentz, though, Kevin O'Connell talked about what he saw. See, last week when McCarthy was away having the baby, Carson Wentz ran the practice on Thursday, and O'Connell talked about that practice.
Carson stepping into that practice last week
Yeah.
as the number one guy. Just how much could you take away from that as you kind of ramped him up this week?
You just kind of felt that poise and presence even from the walkthrough to the practice, and it just kind of felt like a kind of a normal day. And I think the execution and kind of how I was pushing the group, looking for the growth from game 1 to game 2 from a procedural standpoint before the ball is ever snapped, huddle, alignment, landmarks, emotions, and details of things. His ability to absorb all that and then run the show was apparent to everybody. And I think you got a guy that, I was, telling the team today, I mean, you've got a guy that's played at a really high level, played a lot of football, and ultimately is at a place in his career where I think you can really tap into a lot of that while also shaping a game plan that he's comfortable with and he can go out and have consistent success, because that's, really what our whole team needs right now is just in all 3 phases. Can we do the things, schematically that we need to do? And there's going to be, some adjustments made to fit with the personnel and what we think is best to win this game this week.
So there is Kevin O'Connell on the practice that Carson Wentz had, and Carson talked about it himself as sort of feeling pretty good, pretty comfortable getting in there as a veteran quarterback who has done that many, many times. Just to respond to a couple things you guys are saying, Adam says he's in a boot. There's no chance it's a 1-week injury. I guess the Purple Insider has long had a listener that is a foot doctor, and I guess we maybe need that on the show. I'm just telling you from having conversations with some folks about this injury and about where JJ McCarthy is at, that it's not an impossibility, but these things can change quickly. And there are players who have left games and walked out of the stadium in boots and then played the next week. Like, that's happened many times. So we'll see. I'm not saying he's fine. I'm not saying, sources tell Purple Insider he's fine. But I think that if the progression ends up being fast and good in his rehab, that it's possible he could be available as soon as next week, and it doesn't end up being this 2 to 4 weeks total, that when you get that information, you're taking a guess at it right after the injury has happened and right after it's initially just swelled up or something, but it's a hard one to pin down. That's all I'm saying about that injury. Not a foot doctor, not an ankle doctor, not any kind of doctor. But we do have one that listens. So if he's here, you could chime in, okay? Or if any of the rest of you work on ankles or feet as your profession, please let me know. As far as cause and effect says, what is going on with CD and Harry? Why didn't they put them on IR? I think the reason why they didn't put them on IR is because they weren't sure. And with a lot of injuries, it's just like we're talking about with the high ankle sprain, a lot of injuries and a lot of recoveries, you just have to wait and see. This always goes for concussions too, and this is why over the years, Kevin O'Connell has backed off quite a bit from, I think he used to early in his coaching career, kind of spin pretty positive on injuries. Hey, we expect this guy to be back in a couple of weeks. And then it'd be a couple weeks and we'd be going, okay, didn't you say this guy was going to be back in a couple weeks? And I think he got a little frustrated by that. So it's why he's more vague these days, rightfully so, because it's very hard to put an exact date on someone recovering from an ACL. They have to be fully ready. And this does track with the way that the Vikings handled Christian Darrisaw. With the TJ Hawkinson. Like the Christian Darrisaw injury is similar, where he came back to practice last year. Hawkinson did, and he practiced, remember, before the Lions game, and we all kind of went, ooh, is it going to be a revenge? And then it wasn't, and then it was the Rams game, and he didn't play in that one, and we were like, what's going on here? Get him back on the field. And then finally they did, and he showed you at times why it's hard to recover from ACL surgery. So I think that's why, is maybe that they weren't 100% sure. Also, you don't want it to be ready in week 3 and then have to sit there and be like, sorry, can't play you, even though you're good to go. And with Harrison Smith, I think it's the same sort of thing, where it's the ramp back up from this health issue that he's had, but getting back to 100%, feeling comfortable going out there and playing a full game. If you've gone through something over a long period of time, like he was away from the team for a couple of weeks, it might not be the easiest thing to get back to 100% and play in the NFL. So I don't think that they really knew when it came to time to put them on IR or not. And that's kind of why we are where we are. Speaking of IR, Aaron Jones is on IR, which means Cam Akers is back, as we all predicted in the offseason. And Kevin O'Connell talked about what that backfield is going to look like now with Aaron Jones out and Akers here.
What do you see behind Jordan Mason at running back? Do you think Xavier Scott would be next in, or Cam Akers?
Yeah, I think, Zay Scott's been a guy we've been pretty darn excited about, and just ended up, in that last preseason game, in which what I think would have been kind of the exclamation point on what was a great training camp for him. So we're excited. He's healthy. He's ready to kind of absorb some of that loss of such an impactful player like Aaron Jones. And Jordan clearly has already, shown his ability to be a heavy runner, yards after contact, all those things. And the encouraging thing, like we expected about him, was going to be the multi-facet to his game, from some of the great clips we've seen of pass protection to, catching the football, whatever it may be. We've got a pretty, I'm not sure we could have more confidence in Jordan as a potential kind of bell cow kind of back. And then knowing we've got the skill set of Zay, and then getting a chance to bring Cam back here as well, somebody who's familiar with our offense clearly. And
so there you go. Jordan Mason, the bell cow back going forward, but also it sounds like Xavier Scott is going to be RB2. He is going to have to play. I mean, even if you want to play Jordan Mason the majority of the game, it's pretty hard to play a guy every single snap. He played over 50 snaps 4 times last year, had another game with 47. If they want to be on the field this week, I guess a full workload last week wouldn't have been that hard for just about anybody. But if they want to have their usual 60 plays, maybe you have Jordan Mason out there for 50 of them and mix and match. Maybe there's something that you want to do with Xavier Scott. I mean, this is a former wide receiver, caught the ball extremely well in training camp. And it's possible that, hey, next man, it's sort of like with Miles Price, where you go, you know what? The guy's never played in the NFL before, but he's got some talent. He's kind of a baller. Go play football and see what happens. And I'm intrigued by Xavier Scott. I was kind of pounding the Xavier Scott table early in training camp. I'm thinking that there's something here. And I also wondered, as O'Connell was talking, if he was confirming to us a little bit, if he hadn't had the ankle injury, during the last preseason game. I wonder if they would have had him instead of Ty Chandler on the roster. But the Vikings down to Jordan Mason, Xavier Scott, and Cam Akers on the roster now. There's a little intrigue there, but if you wanted to, I saw Mama ask why don't they use Mason more? Well, they're gonna now because they have no other choice. One more thing to bring you from TCO Performance Center today. Carson Wentz spoke with us, very excited about being a Viking, this guy. He was talking about coming down to the Metrodome as a kid and, waving the towel and rooting for all these players that he's walking through the facility and seeing. So it's a nice little moment for Carson Wentz. And he said that he felt that jogging out of the tunnel last week. Also spoke to us about JJ McCarthy and just his general feeling about getting back onto the field.
What's something that you think a young quarterback like JJ is going through right now?
Yeah, I mean, I talked to him quite a bit when he found out. And I found out just before y'all found out the other day. So I knew he was banged up a little after the game, didn't know to what extent. But I just told him, hey, career's long. The career's long, and this might feel like, so much going on right now. But I just told him, hey, stay the course, stay the course. Just reminding him, hey, trust your faith. God's got a plan. He's writing that story, and he's been great. He's in good spirits, and hopefully he gets better soon.
Does anything like this in your career compare to what you're going through this week?
Not really, no. It's very different. I'm not gonna lie. It's exciting though. It was fun to go out there and sit through install meetings, knowing this is a chance personally that it's been a couple years since I've had, like I said, a meaningful start. And so I've been staying ready behind the scenes, doing whatever I can. And like I said, it's been fast paced, just trying to learn this offense, learn these guys, all the things. But so to answer your question, it is quite a bit different. But at the same time, once we went out there and practiced, it was a Wednesday practice, and I kind of fell right back into that same routine I've had for 10 years now.
How ready are you?
I feel great. Physically, I feel great. Mentally, I feel like in a good spot. The coaches have done a great job just helping me try and grasp this as quick as I can. And
I enjoyed the skepticism in Mark Craig's voice. How ready are you, Carson? My goodness. Well, he's had a couple of weeks. Veteran quarterback. He's been around, and I think they'll be ready to go. It just kind of depends on, can they protect him is the first part of this. Is Darrisaw back? Can he get on the same page with Michael Juergens if it is not Ryan Kelly? And would highly advise Ryan Kelly to take all the time that he needs with his concussion, because there is a life after football. But you never know with different forms of concussions and how that goes. So we'll see on Ryan Kelly. Didn't practice today, but Michael Juergens likely to be in there. I think it helps Juergens a ton to have a veteran quarterback who will understand the protections, be confident making the changes and running the operation at the line of scrimmage and so forth. So that does help mitigate it a little. It really comes down to that left tackle, because if Darrisaw is in there, okay, one guy's missing from the line, you're fine. But if he's not, and then you're talking about feeling like a mash unit, you're talking about sandwiching Donovan Jackson in between a guy who's really never played and a guy who's really never played, and then it's three guys who have really never played. That's not what you're looking for, no matter who is at quarterback. And was just going over some Carson Wentz numbers last night, a little more in detail. The one thing that stands out to me about Carson Wentz, and this isn't a hot take or anything, is he can throw it downfield. He can sling the ball. Is he the most flawless executor of an offense when it comes to the underneath and intermediate stuff? No, he was below average the last time that he played, but in most of his career, when he's pushing the ball downfield, which we know Kevin O'Connell wants to do, he has been successful. So if you have Darrisaw back, you can push it down the field. And if you don't, with Trey Hendrickson over there, pretty unlikely that he's going to have a ton of time to do that. So let me get to a couple of your comments here, and then I want to read some emails because, again, not everybody gets a chance to jump in on the live show, and I feel like I don't want to leave anybody out with things that they have to ask. FanDuel question of the day is the over-under for Sunday's game is 41.5 points at minus 110 on FanDuel. How many points does Carson Wentz have to score for the Vikings to win the game? Carson Wentz going to start first meaningful game in quite a long time, actually since 2022. For Wentz, how many points does he have to score with the over-under set at 41.5 Let me know what you think there. And I see Harry saying every quarterback who started games for us in the regular season that wore number 11 took us deep into the playoffs. That is, it's those are facts. Those are facts, Harry. Joe Cap, Wade Wilson, Dante Culpepper, now Carson Wentz. They're just facts. You're just spitting facts. Jay, I don't know if there's a correlation. I'm going to guess probably not, but number 11 is a pretty common number for quarterbacks. Did Nick Mullins wear the same number as Tom Brady? I think he probably did. Jay Deasy says, saw a stat that JJ held onto the ball the third longest behind Williams and Goff. Don't think the O-line is that bad, just that he holds on to the ball too long. Darrisaw back this week will help. So it was a tale of two games. In both of them, he held the ball too long, especially against the Atlanta Falcons. I also thought, from watching it back, looking at the grades, looking at the pressures, that the Vikings offensive line definitely earned a few of those pressures that got to JJ McCarthy. One of them was just a flat out miscue by Brian O'Neill. He got tagged with a sack. But when you say it's a miscue, you also have to give the other team credit because they have good players and good schemes too. So the strip sack, Jeremiah went over this yesterday, and Andrew Kramer actually asked Brian O'Neill about it and got the answer, which was the same as what Jeremiah Searles said, that he was just fooled, that the Falcons looked like they were sending a blitzer. He dropped back when Aaron Jones went out of the backfield, and that guy ended up free. Now, McCarthy's got to be aware of that, but that was kind of what happened there. Sometimes you just get tricked by the other team. I've talked about that a lot. In recent years, there's just way more stunts, way more complicated blitzes, way more tomfoolery going on over there on the defensive side. If you go back and watch a game from 10 years ago even, it's a lot of defenders standing right here. Maybe one guy is showing blitz and he comes. Now you see everybody moving around all the time. That Amazon thing that they have, where it tries to identify blitzers, is pretty cool, but also kind of shows you how much is going on over there. And the Falcons just got him on a few of those. They got Donovan Jackson on a stunt, and then Justin School got flat out beat. And when you combine that with holding on to the ball too long, that's where you have as many sacks as JJ McCarthy took. So I think it was a group effort between backup offensive linemen, really good defensive strategy. I mean, if you're Raheem Morris, you did a smart thing. Let's make this team with their backup center in there halfway through the game, their left tackle who's struggling, their rookie left guard. Let's make them sort this stuff out. So that's why they need to get back to 100%. So in that particular game, it was both. And I think that Carson Wentz should be able to get rid of the ball faster than JJ McCarthy, especially in the quick game area. If there is such a thing on this team, just identifying where it's supposed to go. I wouldn't be shocked if you see TJ Hawkinson get 8 catches or something like that, because I think he's been there and McCarthy was not getting there. And when everything's a little slow, that's how you end up with sacks, unless your offensive line is absolutely awesome. And they were not. They were not awesome. I thought they were really good against Chicago outside of the left tackle, but in Atlanta, it was a little bit of everybody was struggling there. So let me get to a couple of these emails, and then we will get to your questions, comments, and then we're going to have Sam Monson join the show to break down the McCarthy-Wentz situation. And I did want to say something funny about, the last couple days, because it's been many times that we've gone through this together, my friends. If you're new to the show, well, you know what the Vikings have dealt with over the last decade, and that's how long I've been covering the team. So we've kind of seen every bit of it. But I was kind of laughing today because I got a few different emails, and one of them told me to calm down, that I was overreacting to everything. And another one said, thanks for being level-headed. And I was like, which one is it? Which one is it? It's probably both. It's probably both at different times. And I think when you have a situation like this, you try to go over every different scenario, every option, how the team is going to handle it, what could happen. And I think that everything is on the table, from McCarthy coming back next week and being good and leading this team to the playoffs, to Wentz being great and it being another one of those random seasons. And then Harry is adding Carson Wentz to that name of number 11s that have taken the Vikings somewhere. It's always a roller coaster ride with a blindfold on when you are following the Minnesota Vikings. So I just wanted to say that about all the different notes and comments that I've gotten over the last couple of days is none of us knows where this is going to go. But when we're talking about it every single day, we're trying to look ahead, trying to figure it out, trying to project what is going to happen next. Okay, so a couple of emails here. Ted sent me an email, said, what are the chances Max Brosmer will have if/when Carson Wentz plays at or below replacement level? So with Carson Wentz, they are going to want him to play as long as he needs to. And if he struggles and McCarthy is back healthy, then you will see JJ McCarthy. They're not going to go to the third string undrafted free agent rather than go back to the guy who's supposed to be the franchise quarterback. And I don't think they're going to pull Wentz mid-game. It would have to be 4 interceptions. They'd have to be down by 28 points in the fourth quarter. Then maybe you try to get Max Brosmer a couple snaps. That said, I do really like Max Brosmer as an NFL quarterback. And if this thing got off the rails toward the end of the season, I'd be curious for Max Brosmer to start a game. Maybe, I don't know, the last game of the season or something, if this just goes completely bad, because there's one thing that I've noticed about Max Brosmer, and it's what we were just talking about. The guy gets rid of the football. He processes extremely well. I think he's much more physical tools-wise a backup quarterback in this league, which is a great compliment. It's extremely hard to do. Did anybody watch college football this week? Hard to be an NFL quarterback in any capacity. But I think this is the Carson Wentz or JJ McCarthy show. If Brosmer gets in there, though, I do have some confidence that he could play. I don't think he's just going to go in and fall apart. But I would be very surprised if Wentz was just struggling and they said, okay, it's Brosmer time. That would be very surprising. You just don't see that anymore. Back in the day, you used to. Like way back, 80s, early 90s, team would just pull their quarterback. They'd be like, this guy, it's not working today. Next quarterback, it's a little different now. Let's see. Rail Tie Yard Game emailed me and said, is there any way KOC could consider giving JJ the Lamar Jackson rookie treatment? Wondering if sprinkling JJ into the lineup for certain plays or drives could be a way to get him to continue to develop in the coming weeks, while putting him on a pitch count to reduce risk of re-injury, similar to Flacco and Lamar. Well, actually, the New York Giants have been doing this with Jackson Dart. He's gotten in a couple of plays, and they've just sort of randomly tossed him in the game to try to get him a few snaps and just, I guess, do exactly what you're talking about. Implement him a little, develop him a little, just get the feel for playing in the NFL. That doesn't sound to me like something that Kevin O'Connell would do. I don't think it's the craziest thought you've ever had, Rail Tie Yard Game, but I think that it sounds a little bit like something a team would do when they're not really competing for anything. And I know the Ravens that year, they made the playoffs with Lamar Jackson. So, maybe they were, but Lamar was a little different of a dude, like more of a guy you could throw in at wide receiver, more of a guy who can run all the time, zone read, not just once that surprises the other team. I would not really be for that if they're serious about winning games. The Giants aren't serious about winning games. They're trying to build a team for Jackson Dart into the future because that's where they're at in their timeline. They're trying to develop Malik Neighbors into an elite wide receiver and just stay alive and keep their jobs. That's a little bit different from where the Minnesota Vikings are right now. So I'd be surprised if that was something that happened. Evan says, are we seeing KOC avoiding the quick passing game again with a banged up O-line? Feels reminiscent to the Rams playoff game and week 18 against the Lions. Yeah, so the last year was a little bit hard for Kevin O'Connell to change his stripes in those games because they had so much success. Even when the offensive line was struggling toward the end of the year, they were still succeeding. The Packers graded well in their pass rush against Sam Darnold in week 17, and yet Darnold just performed really well. And that was the regression that hit hard, was that Darnold had been actually pretty good under pressure. The play against Seattle, the game against Arizona where he leads them back, against the Falcons, some of those plays were under pressure, and then it just hit like a ton of bricks. But why I wouldn't change the offense entirely and just, he's not a future teller, or whatever. Is that a thing? Future teller? Is that what they call them? A fortune teller. He's not a fortune teller. He's not going, I sense the Lions will have all the answers. And the Lions really didn't. That was actually just Sam Darnold, I think, overhyped and missing throws and them freaking out in the biggest moment. And I think that was that. And with the Rams, there wasn't a counterpunch. This year, they were supposed to have a counterpunch. They haven't had it yet so far. But how much is that on the quarterback? As we were talking about not getting the ball out very quickly, I think that they've wanted quick game, and that takes anticipation. It takes quick reads. It takes quick feet and quick eyes. It's not something we've seen from JJ McCarthy yet because it's his first time doing this. So even though quick game makes sense in your head for a young quarterback, it actually takes longer, I think, to get than rollouts, play actions, where McCarthy's made a bunch of really good throws, where it's been that down the field 15 to 20 yard type of area. That's where all of his best throws have been, because those are, you can drop back, you could set yourself, you get a little more time and space, take your hitch and throw, as opposed to, and you can kind of see it breaking open, as opposed to 1, 2, 3, bang. And then you have to trust something. So I think it's probably that. But this is always going to be a downfield offense. That's just who Kevin O'Connell is and what he believes in. Christian says, please do a deep dive with someone in the know that can explain why the Vikings are so bad at QB sneaks. The Eagles convert 5 1/4, and it feels like we haven't converted one in a decade. I feel you, man. I feel you. I mean, this one was just dropped. This should have been fine. I think that the offensive line had enough initial slam forward to just stick the ball over or jump. But instead, he fumbled it, and then you're not going to get it back and get a first down. But it's a good question. With the Bengals and Jake Browning in town, the famous Brandon Powell tush push, they should get Miles Price to do that this week. Although I don't think Carson Wentz needs his tush pushed. He's a big fella. Maybe I think that could be what it is. I mean, that was McCarthy's first try. Last year, they converted a few last year with Sam Darnold, and Kirk Cousins was not a big dude. And I think he would get pushed back sometimes. He wasn't the best at running that. He didn't have any explosiveness, strength. Like, what we don't realize about Jalen Hurts, and the Eagles cheat, as we saw last week. It was just cheating. They were going before the snap. I don't know what to say. Like, that was just, how do you not call that? I don't know. But Jalen Hurts is a freak when it comes to his leg strength. The dude squats an insane amount. He's really, really strong. He was basically a running back at times at Oklahoma. You don't have that. And Nick Mullins sure as heck wasn't that. That's why you got Jordan Mason, my friends. Let's see. 2 more quick emails. Richard said, JJ McCarthy had a kid 3 days before the game. Yes, he has had 7 bad quarters of football, but that doesn't mean he's done. The 7 out of 8 quarters argument is in its nature based on 2 games. That is the math. Richard, that's true. Richard says, I was a zombie for at least a few weeks before I was able to get some sleep after my kid was born. Just because the kid is starting in the NFL doesn't mean he is immune. He will be fine. I don't think Wentz will play good enough to create the, quote, political issue. Maybe I just don't care as much as these other Vikings fans. I have a bit of empathy from being a father with young kids, but people need to take a chill pill. So I don't know what to do with that, Richard, because a lot of people have had kids before and played football. And you still also, even if you were very tired after having your kid, and I'm sure JJ McCarthy was too, there's a lot at stake and you have a job to do. And I think we can have empathy and say, man, that's a tough week, short week, coming back, Monday Night Football. You have this huge life event, and we can be understanding that he doesn't have a lot of experience. So this isn't like Kirk Cousins doing it, or it isn't like someone who's Phillip Rivers who did it 15 times or whatever and knew exactly how to go about it. It's very different. He's very young. And that's why, as far as your chill pill, that's why I said after the game that as much as I was concerned about multiple things, I also felt like you need to just fight through these things with a quarterback like this, and that there's going to be some very high moments, some very low moments with someone who's inexperienced. And that even goes to inexperience dealing with life stuff and then playing football. because I promise you, there's been a lot of guys inside that locker room who have had life stuff going on, and they got to go and they got to do their job, and there's no excuses, right? But at the same time, we understand that this is the nature of the beast. It's the life you chose. It's the life everybody was on board for until probably the third quarter. And then they went, wait, let me off this ride. Like, no, you bought the tickets. You and me and all of us said this is the right decision to go about this. But then when, we start going down and, we're getting the G-force, we're like, no. So I think there's been a lot of that. I also think that when we spent the offseason seeing good things from JJ McCarthy, and fans have had to wait so long for him and saw so little of him in the preseason. You think about it, how many human beings actually saw JJ McCarthy throw more than the footballs that he threw in preseason? A couple thousand, because of just the people who came to training camp and saw him for a day, and then a handful of us and his teammates, and that's it. And then the whole state sees him for just a few preseason games, really just a few preseason snaps. So there's a creation of building up this perfect Joe Montana quarterback who is the kid that just grabs the bull by the horns and leads the team. And even though he's got some tough moments, he's Jim McMahon out there. Well, sometimes that's going to be true. And other times he's going to throw the ball in the dirt. And that's how it's going to be until he gets comfortable playing in the NFL. And the only way to do it is to play. But they have to figure that out on the fly as they're trying to get to the playoffs. That's what makes this whole thing tricky. Let's see. I got two more emails. This one from Brian says, I refuse to believe that after 8 quarters, JJ isn't better than Nick Mullins, Josh Dobbs, or Case Keenum, or any of the other quarterbacks of the recent past. He will get his chance to prove that he's good. Maybe he's only Derek Carr level, but I know he's not a failure or a bust. I'm also disappointed by a year that feels like another. Can we just have a steady answer at quarterback? Where's our Phillip Rivers? I'm gradually leaning toward the disappointment end of the spectrum when I see how this year is heading already. So a couple different things there. We don't know what he's going to become. We don't know. Is he better than Nick Mullins or Josh Dobbs? Like, well, yeah, he's more talented for sure. And you're confident that he won't be a failure. Anybody can be a failure. Anybody can be a success. If Tom Brady can be the best, but also Peyton Manning can be the best, number 1 pick, 6th round pick, a lot of it's circumstances. Health is a lot of it. Like, a lot goes into being Phillip Rivers to have it work out. I came out of training camp, and I think I probably said that I was confident it wasn't going to be an entire season of just terrible quarterback play. And I would still say that about JJ McCarthy, even though he had a very bad night against the Atlanta Falcons, that I was pretty sure with the supporting cast. I probably said last week when he was ranked 32nd by my friend Steven Ruiz and everybody got mad at Steven. I think I said there's no way he's going to be 32nd. The supporting cast is just too good. And then he kind of played like the 32nd best quarterback for a night. But for the entire season, if he gets back and he plays, I think that he'll come around and he'll turn a corner. It's just when that I don't know. None of us are going to know. And we never really do. But what you're feeling is what a lot of people I think were feeling the last couple days, which is like, not this again, another one of these seasons. And you guys know they'll be in the race. You know that they're not just going to curl up and go away and go 3-14. This is just not going to happen. That's not the Minnesota Vikings. It's not O'Connell. It's not Flores. It's not this team. But it could be one of those seasons where you still feel like you don't have the answer. And maybe that is just as hard or even harder than a season that goes completely down the tank. It actually might be for a lot of you. You would actually prefer a season that goes completely sideways because then you get answers, versus one that is kind of fun and you make the playoffs with a quarterback that you didn't expect it. Well, you've seen that enough times before, and that's not what you're looking for. Okay, last question via email, and I appreciate everybody reaching out here that can't jump on the show. Feel free to shoot me DM, email. Bill said, from preseason observations, is this how you picture the defense looking? Bend, don't break. So far, they have a very good EPA per play against the pass and poor EPA per rush, which checks out for the way that they constructed on paper. Personally, I pictured more of a stifling 3-and-out machine, but I guess they've been consistently playing from behind. Yeah, yes and no. They've looked more fallible than I expected, and that's what you're getting at, is they have looked a little bit more fallible than I thought, especially in the secondary against Chicago, where there were open opportunities. I expected them to give up more run yards. I didn't expect 200 yards to Bijan Robinson, and it feels more on shaky ground than it did last year, where they just seemed like you roll the ball out and they're going to give you a chance to win every single week. They played a really good team, but I don't know that the Falcons are a Super Bowl type of team. They played a really good running back who made a lot of great cuts, made a lot of great reads, made a lot of broken tackles and took advantage of his blocking. DeAndre Swift didn't really do that in the first week. Where I was concerned, though, is I saw a chart from, I think it was Football Insights on Twitter. Let me check and make sure I got that right. I think so. I think that's who it was. Let me see. Yeah, Football Insights on Twitter. I saw a chart that just showed the PFF coverage and PFF pass rush grades so far, and neither one of them is good for the Vikings through 2 games. That's not what you expected. You expected them to be absolutely nasty up front, which they were against Chicago, but they couldn't get a hold of Caleb Williams. The coverage was not good against Chicago, and then the coverage was good against Atlanta, but the run defense was poor. No, it hasn't been to the point where I thought it was going to be, but you make a good point. If you have every single time you go out there, 3-and-out, hey, it's 3rd and 2, you can't get it, you got to punt, you fail on 4th down, you give them the ball at the 40-yard line. It's a lot harder to play football that way. And one thing that always bothers me in football analysis is that these two things are tied together. How the offense plays matters with how the defense plays, and vice versa. Like, they affect each other. And if one of them is lopsided, the other one's going to be impacted. That happens all the time in the NFL, where you'll have a defense that might be the highest graded by PFF, but the team has given up the 15th most points. And you're like, what? Why is PFF grading them so well if they've given up the 15th most points? Oh yeah, their offense stinks and they're punting the ball away all the time. You can't have your defense out there for 10 minutes more than your offense every game, or they're just not going to be that good, no matter who's out there. So I think it's a number of different factors. Plus, they've changed. They're going to have to adapt. They have changed the way they play. It matters that Cashman isn't in there. Like, he is a great run-stopping linebacker. I think Eric Wilson is not. Wilson's a good player, but he's not the same as Cashman. Cam Bynum was a great player. Got $15 million a year. He's making an impact in Indy. Not having Harrison Smith, not having Van Ginkel. That's not exactly the defense that we expected. So really, really good questions. Really, really good questions. So let me get back to the chat now. And I had asked you guys earlier about the FanDuel question of the day, which was the over-under for Sunday's game on FanDuel, 41.5 points. And that is leaning toward the under at minus 110. How many points does Carson Wentz have to get for the Vikings to win? How many points does Mr. Wentz have to lead the Vikings to in order for them to win the game? And let me see. VA Vikings going with the under there. Jay Deasy says 24. Neil's got 21. Cause and Effect 24. Mark has got 24. Son of Beavers 31. So you're giving Jake Browning a lot of credit. Dwayne goes 28. I would say 24 is a good answer. And VA Viking says the defense is going to get better, but the offense remains a question mark. And my thing would be, if the offense doesn't get better, then it's going to be a question mark on the defense too, if they're just out there all the time. So let's see. DACQ says, when can we start questioning some of the other coaches? Feels like the O-line coach might be part of the problem, for example. So you go back before Chris Cooper and where they were at as an O-line for years, pretty consistently finishing by the PFF grades as one of the worst offensive lines in the league. And last year, before Darrisaw got hurt, they were one of the best. And in 2023, they actually graded very strongly, despite some of the weaknesses, but that was Dobbs and that was Mullins. But that actually helped both of those guys perform, is that they had Darrisaw playing at an extremely high level, O'Neal, and they had come together and been okay, at least. 2022, it was a little more leaky, I think, with Ezra Cleveland and Ed Ingram and, of course, Garrett Bradbury. But I think that Cooper has done a good job overall bringing these guys together, but there's backup tackles. Left tackle, there's a reason why the hierarchy in the NFL of pay goes quarterback, edge rusher, receiver, left tackle. It's one of the highest paid positions in the league because you kind of can't do much as an offense without a good left tackle. And you've seen it these last 2 weeks. If your quarterback is dropping back and right behind him is somebody jumping on his back in 2.5 seconds or less, it's very, very hard to thrive. And there's no coaching that. There's no like, hey, Chris Cooper, why didn't you just tell him to do something else? That's hard to do. Hi, buddy. Buddy's going to need to go out soon. So I've got an interview with Sam Monson from Check the Mic podcast. But you got to wait, buddy. I got a few more questions to answer before we let you out. Can you wait? He'll be okay. He can make it for a few more minutes. 19 points from enemy cap. So you're really not thinking that the defense is going to give up much. I think you should take Jake Browning seriously. I mean, he's been in that system for a couple years. He doesn't have much of an arm, and you could turn the ball over against Jake Browning. Like, he threw 3 interceptions last time out. I think he turned the ball over a couple times against the Vikings in 2023, but he's got great receivers. He knows the offense, and he can get the ball out. Actually, I was listening to Sam Monson and Steve Palazzolo today talk about how Jake Browning can get the ball out quickly, and that he actually, his snap to release is very fast. So that's something that the Vikings will have to deal with as they try to rush the passer and create turnovers, is that he is going to, get it out faster. Bruno says, who will be the starting outside linebackers for week 3? The fact that Van Ginkel was able to practice today makes me think that Van Ginkel is going to be in there along with Dallas Turner. But, looking at how they used Van Ginkel in week 1 was kind of interesting. Like, he wasn't just in a traditional outside linebacker spot. He was doing a lot of different things in the game. He was playing at linebacker sometimes, lining up on the same side as Dallas Turner in that game. So their usage will now kind of be worth noting of, like, where does Dallas Turner line up? Where does Van Ginkel line up? And I'm assuming as of right now, if he's back at practice, that he's got a really good chance to play this weekend. And I mentioned this last night, but there were times where I was very impressed with Dallas Turner, and there were times where I was disappointed in Dallas Turner. There were a couple times where he really worked Kyle Pitts on the edge, and there was another time where, Pitts really took him out of a play, and really shouldn't have a tight end taking him out of a play like that. That's more of a pass-catching tight end. So there's work to do there for Turner. The sack was nice. There was another pressure that was really good. Still think we're on kind of wait and see type of mode for Dallas Turner, but I think we know he's going to play a lot. That's for sure. Jason says, who's the backup to Jordan Mason? I think that's going to be Xavier Scott. The way that KOC talked, that sounded to me like that was going to be a Xavier Scott, which, for those of you who watched a lot of preseason, you're familiar with him. He's a big guy, and he's got some burst to him. He's got good hands. I don't know if they want him in there pass protecting, but they were very high on Xavier Scott during the preseason, like surprisingly high on somebody like that who had not played in the NFL at any point before. But I think they wanted him to be RB3 all along. Mama says, I miss watching Mullins throw for 400 yards. I will say it was entertaining. It was definitely entertaining. That is for sure. It was. So, let's see. Nick says all of JJ's preseason quick game throws were to Jordan Addison and Lucky Jackson. Hard to have chemistry when you don't have reps. Good point. That's a good point. Nobody had better chemistry with him than Jordan Addison. No question. And that's why if he is ready to play next week and Darrisaw is ready to go, and let's just say one of you said 19 points. Let's say they win 19-17. Carson Wentz isn't really all that good. They find a way to survive, and you go, okay, you're 2-1. You're in this, right? You got a season. And McCarthy is healthy or healthy enough to play against Pittsburgh. Okay, off you go. Then you get Jordan Addison back, and if Darrisaw is back, it's a different story. It just is. It is. Like, we talk about how poor it was against Atlanta. There's no question. There's no silver lining there. But at the same time, he didn't have his favorite wide receiver, and he didn't have someone to draw any attention away from Justin Jefferson. I think that Addison at least makes the opponents think about it. And there's not so much of that with Jalen Naylor. So Addison coming back. Okay. Sorry, that's good. World Debt Now says, we're waiting for Addison to come back so we can tush push. That's funny. That's very good. When is CJ Ham coming back? I think he is eligible to come off in week 4 off the IR. And the expectation is that he's going to be able to play. They have missed a little bit of that, like in pass protection, CJ Ham, because they use CJ Ham a lot over these last couple of years in key pass protection downs, even when they had Aaron Jones. And they were not able to do that these last couple of weeks. Mama says the unofficial FanDuel question: do you think Brosmer will see playing time this season? I think it's possible that he could get into a game. Look, who knows? Carson Wentz could get hurt on the first series and it's Max Brosmer time. And then you never know. Like, we've seen every permutation in NFL history of backup quarterbacks coming in, taking people places. You never know. You never know. So, I mean, if you were going over under 0.5 passes for Max Brosmer, I'd probably take the over that they're going to get him in at some point. So Eric says not everyone thought this was the right decision. The majority, yes, but not all. So reliving that, it's just too early, because there were a few people that, reached out to me in whatever way, people I know or listeners, who were like, hey, remember when everyone was just destroying you for saying it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if Sam Darnold came back? And while that's true, I also said, once the decision was made, this is the way they have to go, because they have to build the roster this way through free agency. As some of you have occasionally pointed out, they don't have a bunch of young draft picks who are stepping up into superstar roles at this point. And that means that they have to spend in free agency to build this roster, or through trades like with Jordan Mason. And that would have been very hard to do if they kept Sam Darnold, because he wasn't going to sign a contract. And I guess there was a world where you sign Darnold and trade McCarthy. I don't think anybody wanted that to happen. There were very few people on the side of the Aaron Rodgers thing. I was completely against that. But as far as the Darnold thing goes, once it was settled, it felt like you could never really make that fit anyway, with the contract, franchise tagging him, and then with the fan base as well. Because once the myth of JJ McCarthy, and we'll see if it becomes reality eventually, but mythology, like building him up into this larger than life franchise quarterback in everybody's heads last year. If Darnold played the way that he did, that McCarthy played against the Falcons, they lost, the whole stadium would have been cheering for JJ by the end of the game. And then you're already there at week 2. I mean, heck, that might have been happening in Chicago for the handful of fans that made the trip in the first half. So I don't think that would have been a happy situation either. But you're right. Like, there were some folks who wanted to see Sam Darnold come back after a very good season last year. Mama says, what is your ideal scenario for the rest of the season with the way it plays out? McCarthy gets better and takes back the job from Wentz after a few weeks. I mean, the most ideal situation would be that Carson Wentz goes 2-0 in the next 2 games. And then over in London, JJ McCarthy steps back in after 2 decent games for Wentz, but not life-changing. McCarthy steps back in, and he's kind of has it click in a little bit, and there's still some grind to go. But by the time they start hitting the really tough teams, you do have Philadelphia, the Chargers, but that he's got the bye week to go through, and he comes out of that, just making progress and giving them a chance to win. And then by the end of the season, you're in the hunt. You got a chance to make the playoffs. McCarthy comes through and gets you there, and then you see who you match up with and how things work out. That's probably the best case scenario right now. I think it's off the table that JJ McCarthy just flips a switch and is like the best quarterback in the league. I think we can all be realistic and say that there's development here that has to happen. But maybe these 2 weeks are a mental reset for him. It's just a lot to take in over the first couple of weeks, step back a little bit, and then come back in and perform overall well enough to keep them in the playoff race. I think right now that's probably the best case scenario, that you would be going into the playoffs saying, hey, he's got a chance. If he steps up, he's got a chance. Or you'd be going into even next year with saying, hey, we know he can play. Maybe it didn't work out perfectly, in 2025, but he can play. That to me is the best case scenario. Let's see. Not sure how exactly to pronounce the name. Fanny, I think it is. I think you've told me before. Sorry about that. Didn't put CD and Harrison Smith on IR because they need to practice to get ready, and they can't practice with the team if they're on IR. Yeah, they need the ramp up time. You can work on the side. I don't know every single rule with that when it comes to IR. You're probably right that they would have to work on the side, and they're able to practice. But I also think that it just had to do with they thought they could get him back before week 4. That is another part of it. But I don't know exact rules for how much you can have a guy do when he's on IR. I think if you, it's like a 21 day. So I think that I believe it's a 20, I'm trying to think how many days it is, a 21 day when you are going to take someone off of IR, that they do have a ramp up period. So that's built into the rules, because that was how it worked with Hawkinson. And then it was like getting closer to you have to take him off IR. So they would have been able to still do that. It's just that you wanted to be able to activate them or have them ready if it's week 2, if it's week 3. I just think they really didn't know. Just because they're the medical professionals doesn't mean that they have all the perfect answers. Aaron says confidence level that Wentz can get Jefferson 10 targets. Well, unless he wants to go to jail, then he better. I hope everybody knows what I'm talking about. Post games for years, every time that Jefferson doesn't get 10 targets, I say like someone needs to go to jail now. And the last 2 weeks, someone has been jailed after the game for not getting Justin Jefferson the targets. That's something I think he can. I mean, go back, look at 2021 with Michael Pittman. This dude just threw the ball at Michael Pittman like every play. I think he had 138 targets or something, or 100 and something like that. He is willing to throw to his number one target. I guarantee that. And that's where, when there's a discussion of like, if Wentz gives them a better chance to win right now, he kind of does, because he has a history of winning games in the NFL, and he's got experience, and he can get the ball to Jefferson in a tighter window, or with a little more anticipation, or just a little better of a read, a little quicker snap to release. I think that JJ has struggled with a lot of that. That the plays are designed to go to Jefferson. And if only 3 of them end up going to Jefferson, something's gone pretty wrong. Let's see. X large something. I'm sorry. Sometimes your names, they gave JJ for your contract. They should use him for 4 years. Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I see what you mean. A 4-year contract. Yeah. Well, that's right. The rookie contract is relevant to this. It is relevant. And that's why you have to find out as much as you can. Where the problem is that everybody in the organization expected to be playing in January. When they started this season, they were thinking, we got to prove we can win in the playoffs. We had this discussion. O'Connell's got to prove he can win in the playoffs. And that's where it might get muddy if Wentz plays really well these next few weeks. And then you're going to say, you got to do everything you can to get in the playoffs. It isn't developmental. It doesn't come down to just maximizing the rookie quarterback contract as much as you want to, but it just has to do a lot with this year getting to the playoffs and who's going to give you the best chance to win. And that's what Kevin O'Connell is going to make the decision on going forward. He's going to make the decision on a weekly basis on who gives him the best chance to win that week. That's how you have to do it under this scenario. If they were the Giants, I'd say play JJ McCarthy no matter what. KFT says there was a good article on McCarthy's tendency to throw to the right, which he does 62% of the time, caused the Falcons to rotate their coverage and clamp down on the right. See, things like that are, to me, you just have to keep coming back to inexperience. And he, I think, did this in college, right? Where his accuracy to the left was not the same as the right. There were a few interceptions through training camp and mini camp where I believe we talked about it at one point. Like, it's the same sort of, the pick six was the same sort of throw that he kind of, when he was throwing to the left, really telegraphed. And I know that people broke that down and said it wasn't necessarily his fault, but, you know, we had kind of seen that a few times, that even in college, he was more comfortable throwing to one direction. But that, like, this is what young players do. Young players hold on to the ball too much. They telegraph their passes too much. They don't use their eyes to move defenders too much. And you can work through it, as teams have done with Brock Purdy and CJ Stroud and Jared Goff a few years ago, and, you know, and so forth. But it takes, you got to block. You have to run. You have to get a touchdown on 1st and 2. Like, the margin for error is just a little bit lower when you have some limitations. Also, he's only thrown 40 something passes so far. They just have, you know, when it comes to throwing to the left and right, you throw 2 passes to the left or something, it's going to get closer to 50%. So I don't know if I want to say that's completely a thing, but it probably is. It probably is. Outline Man says Darrisaw practicing in full means absolutely nothing. I'll believe he's in there when they see it. Well, he's going to play eventually. I mean, when you say I'll believe it when I see it, I mean, he'll definitely play again in the NFL. I'm pretty sure of that. I don't think we've reached, like, sounded the alarms on Christian Darrisaw. What ended up happening was he got ahead of schedule, it seemed, to get back in minicamp. And reasonably so. I think we all started saying, like, well, okay, like, what does this mean? Does this mean he can actually get back for week 1? And the fact that he was practicing by the end of camp, we started to look at that and say, well, shouldn't he be out there? Shouldn't he be out there? But when you go back and look at TJ Hawkinson and his timeline for his ACL and how long it took, it's right around now for getting back. And they were cautious with that one too. So you'll see it eventually. It's just no one can promise you when. And it does matter he's practicing in full. It absolutely matters that he's practicing in full, because if he wasn't, then I would be saying, all right, what the heck is going on? Jarrell says, why don't we put any pressure on KOC like we put on these players? Do you think he's part of the problem? No, I don't think he's part of the problem. The reason why Kevin O'Connell gets the benefit of the doubt is because you remember that fish from that movie that forgot everything the minute that something else happened? Dory, I think. What is the movie? Finding Nemo? That's football fans. That's football media a lot of the time. The minute something else happens, it's like, oh yeah, what? Nothing happened before. KOC's the problem. It's like, whoa, hey, whoa. I think there's reasonable critiques of Kevin O'Connell. And something that I'd like to know, couldn't get in there today with the question, but, you know, I'll keep trying. With coming off a loss like that, I am curious about how he assesses himself, because he talks about him being responsible as well. I am curious about, you know, when he looks in the mirror and says, you know, why didn't I run Jordan Mason at the 1 yard line, right? Or if, you know, he's so confident, which you have to be an NFL head coach, that he does think he's got the answers. I'm not really sure. Like, he's always said, I'm looking inward, but we've kind of seen a lot of the same trends. At the same time, that's only trends when things go wrong, and they haven't gone wrong much. I mean, 2023, they're over 500 with Dobbs, and they got back to 500 and fought back with Cousins. Cousins played very well in 2 seasons. Darnold was spectacular last year. Like, the man has earned a lot of cachet and the coach of the year to be able to say, like, we have a sample size. If this was the first year he was coaching and it was a Ben Johnson situation, I think we would be like, does this guy know what he's doing? But we have a sample size to know he knows what he's doing. And when you look at the things that we have tangibly, the NFL player survey, they put him at the very top. They give him the highest grade. They don't have to do that. Pittsburgh players didn't give Mike Tomlin that grade. They don't have to do that. It's an anonymous survey. So when you have the respect of the players, you have a ton of wins in the regular season, but also you have your flaws that we're going to talk about, and we have a lot after games and when there's mistakes made and so forth. We'll break them down, but we shouldn't lose the forest through the trees. We shouldn't be Dory and just forget in Chicago, coming out of Chicago. I thought, what a great coaching job coming out of Chicago, managing McCarthy on the sideline, like well done, keeping everybody calm and focused in that game, keeping your young quarterback on track, like great job, called a great second half, got guys open for McCarthy, and then it's a bad game, and why aren't we blaming the coach for everything? Well, the coach has won a lot, so he's going to get that. That doesn't mean he's perfect. It just means that, when you take Sam Darnold to the point that they did, it says a lot about who you are as a coach. But I also think it wouldn't be football if after every loss we didn't just say F the coach, because that's what they do everywhere. I'll give you a great example of this. How about Ohio State, Michigan last year? Remember how Ohio State won the national championship? The number of Ohio State fans that I saw on the interwebs who wanted Ryan Day fired. It's the worst coach ever. He should never step foot back in the state of Ohio ever again because he lost one game and then he wins the national championship. I don't know. Remember when Andy Reid in Philadelphia was such a bum because he kept getting to the NFC championship and couldn't get over the hump, and then gets a different quarterback, wins a bunch of Super Bowls. Belichick was a loser in Cleveland. I don't know. I think we need to be a little bit more maybe analytical about it than emotional when it comes to evaluating coaches, because I think that the emotion of this week of the disappointment of McCarthy being hurt and the just horrendous nature of that game coming off of the bad taste in everyone's mouth after last year has probably pointed some arrows in the wrong directions. That doesn't mean he's perfect. We've gone through all the details there, but when people say to, just last week, I said to Robert Mays, so this is not me, this is a guy who covers the whole league. In fact, he's a Bears fan. And I said, if they did an all coach draft, where would you have KOC? And he said top 5. I mean, I think that they're in a very good spot with the head coach position. And warts and all, like there will be some shortcomings, but you go around the league, like you're in a good spot with the coach. You're in a good spot for this coach to guide them through this decision. You're in a good spot with the coach to guide JJ McCarthy into getting better at football and giving him the best chance to succeed. Is he going to make a stupid play call from time to time? Yes, he will. Yes, he will. So that is where I stand on that. When I see the comments that, he's not good enough and this and that, like you're just not going to convince, you don't have the evidence. You don't have the evidence. This is an evidence-based show. You're going to have the evidence there. Mama says, do we think Wentz is going to go for 300 and 3 or 4 touchdowns? I don't know about that. Where does, curious, speaking of evidence, curious where the Cincinnati Bengals are ranked. 7th best graded defense by PFF so far, but they did play 2 bad teams. I don't have a lot of belief in Jacksonville, so that he did play 2 bad teams. Hey, if you haven't answered that FanDuel question of the day, feel free to do that. Over-under is 41.5 points on FanDuel. How many does Wentz have to score to win the game? That's the question. I don't think he has to go for 304 touchdowns. That would be a lot to ask. Peter says 37. You're not trusting the defense there. Rent 509 now, 27 points. Buddy cam. I probably can set up a buddy cam. Maybe I should do that. He's just laying here now. He got all excited, but he's just laying here now. Maybe I can. Maybe I can set up another camera to point down at him. He's just laying on the floor, just taking a snooze. As he does. Buddy needs a purple insider shirt. We should get him that, like a little jacket. I'm not a dresses up the dog guy though. He's got a rain jacket and he really doesn't like the rain, so he has that. But he's not like going to get dressed up for Halloween or something. Maybe he has a race car because he's so fast. Hayden, can you give a quick recap for those of us just getting here of, you mean the injury report and such? The good news was Van Ginkel back, Christian Darrisaw practicing in full, Jeff Okudah practicing in full. The bad news, of course, is no Ryan Kelly, no JJ McCarthy, and that Harrison Smith is still limited. That's kind of the quick rundown there. And then we talked about a lot of other stuff. Jarrell says, what's your take on KOC as a play caller? I think the play calling analysis is the hardest thing to figure out in football, because if you go through all of them, you have to go through the logic of the call, not the result. So does it make sense on 3rd and 1 at that point in the game when you're down 15-6 to take a shot to Jalen Naylor? Oh, it absolutely does, because your win probability is probably 5% at that point. But if you hit that shot and he scores an 80-yard touchdown, well, hell yeah, like you're back in the game. So that's a great play call. You call a play in the end zone or at the 2-yard line where, yes, I thought they should have gone to Jordan Mason, but my gosh, your quarterback should take a snap and throw it to a wide open guy in the end zone. There's plays all over the field that were missed for whatever reason. What's the play call that says left tackle gets beat immediately and quarterback gets killed? You know, there were guys open, there were opportunities to win this game, but there's also 5 plays in the game where I go, I don't know if that's helping. I don't know if going empty is helping there in this situation with the way that McCarthy was playing. So my take on it is the overall results of the first 3 years have been a lot of explosive plays, a lot of success throwing the football. The run game has never been good to me and still isn't. Even with as much as we like Jordan Mason, still has been a great running game the first 2 weeks, not one that is dominated. And not one that, that you've seen other teams really feel the running game outside of 1 quarter for Chicago. So there's blind spots, and there's also some big upside to the play calling. But where it's really shined, though, and I know it didn't in this last 4th quarter, but his quarterbacks have been very good and very successful at winning games in the 4th quarter and being confident and finding receivers at the end of halves, winning in those moments like we've seen the last 2 weeks. I mean, I would put O'Connell for his ability to get receivers the football, his ability for his quarterbacks to find them on time, have the right reads. I would put it all very high. But the problems that have persisted with this team have not been fully resolved in 2 weeks. Oh, there are other things that we're going to be watching. Can Wentz have himself a Russell Wilson 450-yard game? That was one of the weirdest games I've ever seen, man. One of the weirdest games I have ever seen. Kurt says offensive genius Billick or KOC. Hot take. I don't think anybody's a genius. I don't think anyone's a genius. I think that there are coaches in the league who are better or worse at understanding what maximizes quarterbacks. And I think that it is a players' league. So if you have Justin Jefferson, you're better at your job. I don't think anyone's a genius. Not in football. I think there's geniuses who invent stuff that is like a cell phone or how we're whoever invented the way that I'm live streaming right now, that person's a genius. Football, I don't know. Football, it's a lot of space, timing, coaching details, and then having really good players to execute it. Because if Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, you've even seen it. You've even seen it. How genius is KOC without Christian Darrisaw in there? Less. As everybody would be, as every coach should know at all times, that it has a lot to do with who your players are. And we've seen that. Billick, though, he was a great coach, I think. Also had Randy Moss. Hey, his play call was crazy. Go long, Randy Moss. Crazy play calls. I'm sure it was more complicated than that, but that's exactly what I mean. I got Sam Monson coming up here, and I want to first tell you about my friends over at Hims, who can help you out if you're feeling a little frustrated. Maybe you're in denial. Maybe you're down about where you're at with the old hairline. Well, there's an easy way to help. Not too hard. It's through Hims. You could take the next step in getting your hair back with confidence by using Hims. You could get treatments with clinically proven ingredients that regrow hair within 3 to 6 months without waiting rooms, no hoops to jump over, just ingredients that have a track record of success. Hims offers a convenient access to a range of prescription hair loss treatments. You could do it your way, whether you like oral medication or a spray. There's a lot of different ways you could do it, and you shouldn't have to go out of your way not to feel like yourself again. So Hims brings you expert care straight to you, 100% online access to personalized treatments that put your goals first. No hidden fees, no surprise costs, just real personalized care on your schedule for simple online access to personalized and affordable care for hair loss, ED, weight loss, and much more. Visit hims.com/Purple Insider. That is HIMS.com/Purple Insider for your free online visit. hims.com/Purple Insider. Individual results may vary. See website for important safety information. Okay, a couple more questions, and then the dog does have to go out. So I will bring you Sam Monson. Also, really just good conversation with Sam. Check the mic, former PFF, lifelong Vikings fan. So he's been in it with you this entire time. He knows exactly what this is like. Kurt says, how much different does this franchise look like if they hired Jim Harbaugh? I feel like that's a topic for July or something. I don't know. They've won a lot of games with KOC. But last year, Harbaugh got his team to the playoffs in his first year like KOC did. They got killed. So I don't know. Harbaugh's a good coach. KOC's a good coach. Maybe their identity's different, but we're seeing it now with them throwing the ball a little bit more now that they have good weapons. That guy knows how to win. And I think so does KOC. But will either one of them win a championship? Will they win in the playoffs? We're going to have to find out there. Skyler says Wentz takes the Vikings to 12-5 and JJ is traded to the Browns this offseason. I did joke with my wife to learn the name Bryce Young when the Vikings make the trade for him next year. I was kidding, but I don't know. You never really know. It's like when I started to go down that path the other day, it's hard because you can get there. You can get to this, hey, he just never gets back on the field and then there's a quarterback competition and he doesn't win it. And then what? Because that's happened. It's happened in the league recently. You can also get to he heals quick, starts next week, and it's fine. And he goes right back to being the guy. That's how wide of a range. This is what you get with an unproven quarterback. You get this massive range of different outcomes, and nobody knows how it's going to work out. So, did they sign Wentz for 2 years? I thought it was only one, but I haven't looked at his contract. I was assuming it was only one. Harbaugh has said that McCarthy is like Herbert, a little different in terms of the actual arm talent. Herbert, bigger, but I think personality, McCarthy's a little more outgoing. They both have strong arms. Now we've gotten to the trolling element where Christian Ponder's name comes up. Thank you, Timothy, for breaking that streak with a 28, referring to how many points Wentz will have to score. I haven't given my answer to that. My answer is, I think, or maybe I did. I think probably 24 is the right answer because that gives a little leeway for Jamar Chase, T. Higgins to do some stuff, and you still find a way to come out with the win. I don't think the Bengals are a joke, and I'm going to have a guest on Thursday that's going to break that down, but I don't think the Bengals are just a laughingstock. I think they've got good players. Deplorable Neanderthal says, I'm always perplexed how quickly narratives shift and go back and forth weekly sometimes. The NFL, my friend, the NFL. It must be so boring to be in Buffalo or in Baltimore where you're just like, and I'm saying this tongue in cheek because you guys would love that. But is it January yet? Because I know we're going to be there. I mean, the Vikings have never had that feeling. It's always, like you said, back and forth on a weekly basis, and you never know where this thing is going to take you. So Sam says Wes Phillips seemed to be surprised at questions from us yesterday about the scheme choices during the press conference. Yeah, I mean, especially he seemed a little surprised about being asked about Jordan Mason and some of the play. The problem with asking Wes about that is that he's not calling the plays, so if it's Kevin O'Connell, it's more of an O'Connell question, I think. And he could only say well, he's been out there. It's not like he hasn't been on the field. And I think he's run maybe 4 times in short yardage. I'd like to see that be more, but it's not like his question to answer. So maybe that was why it was a little tricky. He did have great explanations on the quick game though. I enjoyed that. I wrote about that yesterday. So, okay. Well, let me, bring you this, Sam Monson conversation because we talk about all the different scenarios, the situations, and where this is going to go. And I think Monson is maybe a little bit of a Carson Wentz believer. So here he is. Check the Mic podcast It is one of my go-tos. So here's Sam Monson. All right, we welcome back into the show for his 1000th appearance, Sam Monson. Check the Mic podcast, my go-to as I am driving out to TCO Performance Center to find out whatever hell awaits me out there. And then these days, I mean, yesterday, Sam, I go out there thinking, we're going to get an update on Christian Darrisaw, maybe a couple other players who got banged up, and on to the next football game. And oh no, it's one of those seasons. Sam, you have followed the Minnesota Vikings since childhood. What's up with this, man? What's up with it? You've been following it longer than I have. What's the deal here? Why does this always happen?
And with JJ McCarthy, how come every time he comes out of a game looking healthy, it actually emerges later on that, oh, by the way, he's hurt and it's going to be longer than you think it is, and he may be down for, an extended period of time. Like last year, we came out of a preseason game being like, man, JJ McCarthy looks great. He's going to win the starting job. It's all good. And then in 24 hours, that went from, no, actually, he's hurt and he's going to be down for a bit to, actually, you're not going to see him until next year.
Yeah, I don't know why that's happened both times. I think in this instance, he probably should have gotten a little more checked out, but somebody else was in the blue tent, which is how this entire season has gone on, is that someone's always been
at the time.
Yeah, when we've looked down at the sideline at any given time, the blue tent is up and somebody is in it for this team as they've been hit with this rash of injuries through the first 2 weeks. But I think that this one was probably one of those adrenaline things that you could fight through. And then when you wake up in the morning, your leg is twice the size that it was before. So this stuff does happen. I know that people are watching the tape like Sasquatch videos, is he really hurt? What is the team hiding? They've benched him. But Sam, I don't think that you would take a young quarterback who was 1-1 through his first 2 games and then just say, you know what, after you had one of those games not be good, you are going to go sit down for a while. So now the recovery starts. I've been accused by some of being a little overreactionary to this and looking too far down the road at when could he even come back, and what if Wentz plays well and do they stick with him? So why don't you give me your whole reaction to the situation, and then we can compare and contrast.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, so we're like, 2 games into JJ McCarthy's starting career. And unfortunately for him, he's now going to get compared to both Carson Wentz, who's going to come off the bench and come in for an injured version of McCarthy, and to Sam Darnold, who's currently playing pretty well in Seattle, who they let go. And there's not much, it's just an unfortunate reality that he's tied to those guys now because of the way things worked. From Minnesota's perspective, they were in a tough spot last year because of the way the season ended with Sam Darnold. I think if it hadn't ended with those final 2 games, I think it would have been a different outcome. I think they would have found a way of moving the money around and keeping Darnold in the building, if he hadn't imploded right at the end. But because he did, and because the implosion was so complete and total and, earth shattering to the foundations that he laid in the previous 14, 15 games, it changed everything. And they went, you know what, let's stick with the original plan. Let's save the money. Let's use that on the offensive line. Let's put JJ McCarthy out there. And if he's, learned from the sideline and developed, and we put a situation around him, well, then he can be good as well. And logically, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's a reasonably sound plan and made sense. Unfortunately, number one, there's part of it which looks like McCarthy might not be, ready or at the level that some of these other young quarterbacks are at. And number two, he's missing a lot of that supporting cast right now, which is a flaw in the plan, right? That all these guys are supposed to be there and the situation is great. Well, that's not true if Christian Darrisaw is not out there, and suddenly you're choosing between one of 2 left tackles that doesn't belong playing, protecting a young quarterback. So I think it's definitely true that McCarthy is not playing well right now, but it's also true that his left tackle is a disaster and that he doesn't have his number 2 wide receiver. And there are things there that are not the way they're supposed to be, and that's definitely not helping matters.
Right. And I think that, after you came out of the first game and we all did the tape analysis, and you guys are friends with JT O'Sullivan and we all watched his breakdown, I think the feeling was that the first couple of quarters, he didn't make terrible decisions. And even though everything went wrong, it wasn't entirely on him. You mentioned left tackle, but also the first game, Justin Jefferson had a shockingly bad game. And it was like, okay, like I could kind of get that. And then he goes into Atlanta. Now it's a short week. He has a child in the middle of the week and then comes out and looks like a guy who had a short week, has barely played any football, had a child during the week. And it was just everything was a little bit slow for him. But I was not in a spot where I was going to say, okay, folks, I'm sorry, write it in BUST. I was not ready for that because, well, one, it's just one game. And we've seen lots of quarterbacks have one bad game. I went through it. I went through all the worst QB ratings since 2000 for the Vikings. And I found a Brad Johnson who won a Super Bowl, a Kirk Cousins who won plenty of games, a Dante Culpepper game that went horribly wrong. This stuff happens in the NFL. And when you looked at their schedule going forward, it was pretty favorable to win some games. So I wasn't ready to call anything on JJ McCarthy other than I'm a little concerned about where this is going to go from a Super Bowl perspective. Like, can you really compete in the NFC North with the Packers and what we saw from the Lions bouncing back against Chicago and crushing a team that the Vikings barely escaped? I think there was concerns there. How far can a kid come with accuracy right away? How far can he come with his processing and make it quicker during a season? But I wasn't ready to make any major conclusions with him through those two games.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think a lot of it depends because obviously you only hear the sort of PR spin from the team, right? It's like, oh, the team, they think JJ McCarthy's amazing. Like he's the guy. They've got total confidence in him. It sort of depends what the reality of that is. And I was messaging you yesterday. I'm like, when did they see him again after his injury, right? Because if they have actually sort of seen a good amount of him practicing and throwing the ball and like if they are actually that confident in him, then you're right. One bad game is just one bad game. And it doesn't, it doesn't change that you believe this guy's really good and, he can be the quarterback going forward. And, you just work to put things right. If that's all kind of just spin, like that's just what you say when this is your quarterback now, well, of course, you're like, you guys haven't seen him like behind the scenes. He's amazing. He's a leader. He's masterful in practice, blah, blah, blah. Like if that's all just the stuff that you put out there because this is now your starting quarterback and actually they don't know that much about JJ McCarthy, then it may change things quicker because like the more meaningful data is what he's doing in real games, because in the regular season. And if you don't actually have that much sort of practice data counteracting that, then I think your opinion on the guy can change pretty quickly, particularly when look, Carson Wentz, his career has gone off the rails pretty hard, and he's got quite a lot of bad tape on his resume at this point. However, he does also have, a seriously lofty kind of draft status way back in the day. He's got the prototypical tools and, all those kinds of things. And Kevin O'Connell theoretically is, this kind of quarterback whisperer moniker, a guy who's been able to rewire quarterbacks, right? He's takes a lot of credit, I think, probably justifiably for changing the way Kirk Cousins plays the game and adapting him. I don't know how quickly he can do that. I don't know if it works for every quarterback, but you at least have to be vaguely intrigued by the idea of Kevin O'Connell working with Carson Wentz and, having him play a period of time in this offense.
So the first part of that, what's really unique about it is that they had only practice time basically that was also witnessed by us with JJ McCarthy because he didn't practice at all during last season. So then we see him a little bit in workouts and a little bit in OTAs. We watched the entire training camp. And I will say that by the end of training camp, he looks pretty well in command of the offense. There's just no way to really simulate real football when you're going against Raheem Morris, who knows the Vikings system from working with the Los Angeles Rams and didn't go so good against the Rams either time against coaches that understood what KOC could do. But the other part of it is that the offensive line being as messed up as it was, and they didn't run the ball particularly effectively with Aaron Jones or with Jordan Mason. So it's not like they stayed ahead of the sticks the entire day. They needed a really good performance from their quarterback, and that was not there from them. So it was kind of a lot to ask right away. But you're right. Like the sample sizes that we're working with JJ McCarthy, that's the trend of his entire career. Like when you have a Michael Penix and the guy's thrown 4,000 college passes and then comes in and gives you a half a season last year or whatever, 3-4 games, like that team's pretty confident in what they have. I think the Vikings walked into this not really sure what JJ McCarthy was going to be. And I think what Kevin O'Connell thought and what the organization thought was we can sign Will Fries, Ryan Kelly, we can extend people, we can stack up the defense, and all he's got to do is be Alex Smith, and we're going to win a lot of football games. But turns out being Alex Smith is not as easy as it sounds to just be a game manager, because you have to get the ball where it's supposed to go, and he was not able to do that. That's part one. Part two, I am intrigued by Carson Wentz. I've watched Carson Wentz warm up and been like, okay, that is a big man with a big arm. And last time I checked, the last big man with big arm was last year, and the guy won a bunch of games in Sam Darnold. So I don't think he's as good as Sam Darnold, but this is somebody who's won a lot of football games in his career. And that's where it gets complicated though, Sam, is if they win their next three, which are against Jake Browning, broke Aaron Rodgers, and then Joe Flacco / Dylan Gabriel / Eric Zier / Seneca Wallace. I don't know who's starting for Cleveland at that point. You can go 3-0 with Carson Wentz. And then what do? Because a lot of fans are saying to me, no, you just put back in JJ no matter what. But this isn't really a season to just find out about JJ McCarthy. This is a season to win.
Yeah, and it also comes back to, so number one, what kind of confidence do they have him from the time they've seen him? The other element there is, what did they think of him when they drafted him, right? Because draft priors are still relevant for these guys as well when they're so young and so inexperienced. Like, and again, you only ever hear the kind of the story that's put out there as opposed to what may have been the truth, what may not have been the truth for these quarterbacks that were drafted like 4, 5, and 6 of that group. Because, guys have gone off the board. You don't really know what teams were trying to do, what they wanted to do in an optimal world, what they ended up succeeding to do. The one thing I think we are pretty confident in is Atlanta loved Michael Penix, right? And that was their guy, assuming they were never going to go up and get Caleb Williams or whatever. But like Michael Penix, they loved him. They went hard. They got him, and they drafted him way ahead of where a lot of people seem to expect him going. I don't think we know the same thing for JJ McCarthy and the Vikings and for Bo Nix and the Broncos. I think both of those were still a little bit at the mercy of what they're telling you, But if the Vikings feel or felt the same way about McCarthy as the Falcons did with Penix, well, then again, you've got a much more solid bedrock of, what are they going to, how much more can they go through of growing pains? But if he was second or third choice, if they actually kind of would have preferred somebody else and they settled, quote unquote, with McCarthy, that was just the way it worked out, the best option that they were able to come out of that draft with. Well, then, you don't have that much real estate before you're shaky performances. We've got a guy that's got hurt multiple times already. We've seen one good quarter of football from him. We didn't necessarily love him that much to begin with. This Carson Wentz might be good. Let's see what we have here. So a lot of this sort of depends on priors that we're not necessarily privy to and exist just locked away in the building somewhere, which could be, all the way from, there were some tools to work with here. We roll the dice. Generally, it was the sort of the mathematically, fiscally sound thing to do in the offseason to move on from Sam Darnold. And right now, this looks bad. Or it could be, we think this guy is phenomenal. He's still extremely inexperienced. He's been unlucky with injuries, and we still have total confidence in him moving forward, even if, we have to put him on the shelf for a month while he gets healthy from a bum ankle, right? But as soon as he's healthy again, it's right back to JJ because he's our guy. And really, it's impossible to know from the outside where they are on the spectrum between those two extremes.
Right. I mean, when we talk about training camp, we watch from the sideline and we see whether passes are completed or not. And sacks are just like, oh, well, he held on to it a little too long there. That's fine. Sacks in real life are you get destroyed and ripped to the ground and hurt your ankle, although he hurt it on a run. But the point being that Kevin O'Connell would take all the tape every single day and go through and study every single detail. Is he really getting it or not? And he would know a lot better if JJ McCarthy was actually on point or if he had a bunch of concerns going into the game. And as you mentioned, they're not ever going to bring that stuff up. Though my feeling, though, from now being with this situation for 2 years was that they were 100% comfortable with JJ McCarthy or Michael Penix as their quarterbacks. And they were going to take, now I don't know which one, if they were both on the board, maybe it would have been Penix. I really don't know. KOC will never say, and I don't think any of us will know except for him and probably Kwesi. And it might be just him. I'm not sure. And the owners. So either way, but I know that they were comfortable with that. But the idea was this guy is very raw. And it's going to take a lot of work to get him to be the NFL starting quarterback he could become. And when you see him in practice, you see the tools. In fact, you watch the games, you see the tools. You see how hard he could throw the football. You also see the lack of touch on the football. You see how fast he can run. But then you see him get hurt while he's running twice. And this is the tough part about a young, raw quarterback. And I was thinking about Alex Smith and how Alex Smith did not become a good quarterback who took a team to the NFC Championship until he was 27 years old. And this is the problem that is created by the National Football League and the salary cap that makes things both interesting and frustrating, is that you can't develop a kid for 3 years. And you can't just say like, oh, we'll keep Sam Darnold, it'll be fine, because you have the rookie quarterback contract. And you also have a world filled with complete insanity, which every single missed throw by Sam Darnold, if he was starting, this is why I think they had no other choice. Like if he was starting, every single bad game, every single missed throw would have come along with JJ chants from the crowd, Stephen A. Smith and the shouty shows screaming at the top of their lungs that they need to play the other kid. Like even in New York, I mean, I think they probably handled it right with Jackson Dart not throwing him right in. But after one bad week of Russell Wilson, it's like, get rid of Wilson. We got to go to the kid. It's a very difficult environment. So you kind of had to figure this out trial by fire. And now you can't figure it out because he's on the shelf. And now what do? Big picture. Because if Wentz plays well, do you go back to him anyway because you have to find out? Or can you not go back to him because Wentz is playing too well? But then if Wentz ultimately struggles, which we know he will, he'll have his ups and downs. Then do you pull the trigger and go back to him? I think now Kevin O'Connell is in a very dicey spot.
Yeah, it's a tough situation. I mean, Colin Cowherd and Tom Brady had an interesting kind of discussion about like the world of developing quarterbacks these days. And Cowherd's theory was, something like a couple of games into year 2, right? A couple of games into year 2. If you don't see it, it's time to move on already. And I think there's something to that. Like obviously there's always nuance with this stuff, but I think it's not the world of quarterback developing now is not the way it was when Brady came into the league or when Alex Smith came into the league. Like the college game and the NFL game have moved so close together now that I think there is something to this idea of if you don't see it pretty early, it's probably not there. Now, you can definitely change that calculus where, if the guy is extremely raw, like an Anthony Richardson, or has extremely low sample size of sort of play or high volume play, or came from a weird offense or whatever, there are reasons why you might want to stick with him beyond that. There's also definitely truth to what Brady was countering with, which is, look, if the coaching is bad development once they get into the NFL, well, then that changes everything. Like if you can screw up a kid, even if he was going to be good right out of the gate coming from a college offense, if the coordinator or the quarterback coach or whatever is bad. So the whole thing I think is pretty complicated, but for a guy like McCarthy and the Vikings, the problem they have is they're expected to be good and win games. So now you're in this tough spot where even if you think he's going to be the guy, you might not have that many games to kind of play around with. But I think if they're winning games with Carson Wentz, you can easily talk yourself and probably the public into the idea of he can still develop from the sideline. Like year one was a write-off, right? We couldn't see him practice. He couldn't practice. He was rehabbing from an injury. Sure, you can take mental reps and, he can learn the system from a classroom, but we couldn't do anything with him, right? You can say now, okay, when he comes back, even if we're going to stick with Carson Wentz for a while, because apparently, like, if the offense clicks immediately with Carson Wentz there, it looks like Darnold last year. Kevin O'Connell has done it again, weaved his magic with a veteran quarterback, and this team looks like a 14-win team again. Well, then you can say, okay, that's fine. Carson's cooking. We're going to leave that the way it is. McCarthy's going to practice. He's going to get reps. He's going to learn from the sideline. And then eventually we're going to turn this thing back over to him. Like, this is not the end for JJ McCarthy. It's just we've changed how this development is going to look like. Instead of learning whilst under fire, from in live reps where things were not going well, you're going to learn from the sideline because the guy ahead of you is doing too well to sit down.
If we follow the natural progression based on history of this thing, and it's just crazy how it gets out of hand so fast with young quarterbacks. And I listened to that Brady and Cowherd thing as well. And one thing I thought was, well, the Vikings check all of the boxes of being able to teach quarterbacks how to play. I mean, that at least we know. So we don't have to say, and I know a lot of fans do, but we don't have to say, well, KOC, he's to blame for all of this. He didn't call the right plays and et cetera. And I get it. And I had as many critiques about some of the play calling against Atlanta. At the same time, we have a big enough sample size to know that this operation and Josh McCown, like, these are gentlemen who know what they're doing when it comes to quarterbacks. But it goes off the rails so quickly with someone like a young quarterback, because you look at San Francisco. Trey Lance comes in, he plays, he gets hurt. They go back to Jimmy Garoppolo. He gets hurt. Brock Purdy comes in. He plays pretty well. The next year, they're just having a quarterback competition in training camp. And usually that's the next natural step to this thing. If Carson Wentz ends up playing the rest of the way, like, I agree that I don't think it's a bad outcome for JJ McCarthy's whole career. He is 22 years old. Yeah. If he were to sit for this entire year, I never thought that was bad. I got assaulted for saying that, bringing back Sam Darnold wouldn't be the worst thing in the world because McCarthy's 22 years old. And now everybody hates that idea when it's somebody else. But I don't think it's a terrible idea. I think, though, that next year would end up being we're really going to find out if JJ McCarthy can play. But it's hard to work that with the timeline because you have so many guys who are very expensive, on the older side, have injury histories, all these things, the risks that they took. And I think that it's a hard thing to make work when you have a very young quarterback and a team that is completely stacked, unless the quarterback is great. And then you're good. But if he's not, then you're sitting there with a great team. And it's like Kyle Bowler Ravens or something, where you're going, like, we just don't really know what to do with this.
Well, it's a classic kind of catch-22 situation where the teams that have the runway to let a quarterback be bad for a while and grow and develop are usually bad football teams, and it's a bad situation to put the kid in the first place. So it's almost sort of damaging that he has that kind of time. The teams that are good enough for the quarterback to have a good situation to be in, well, they need him to be good right away. Like, they don't have the time for this guy to learn on the job and, be good one week and bad the next week, or good in the first half and bad in the second half, or like, they need this guy to be good right away because this is a team capable of winning things right away. And yet that's the environment you want the quarterback getting reps in and learning in, because it's the best situation for him to actually develop. It is a really tough dynamic and that's where you get, I think, the Darnolds of the world, the Geno Smiths of the world, where it flames out, it goes bad. And then these guys have got to go out to the wilderness for a few years before they luck into, another opportunity somewhere. It's not like they earned their stripes and now somebody's going to give them a legit second opportunity. It's like weird stuff happens. A guy demands a trade or a guy gets hurt and you just go, oh, quick, throw in Sam Darnold or Geno Smith or whatever. And then, oh, look, this guy's actually good. Like, it's tough. Like, those guys effectively busted out of the NFL and then circumstance put them back into a starting gig. And maybe Carson Wentz is about to be the next guy, right? Like, Carson Wentz effectively has busted out of his position as a starting quarterback, certainly as a franchise quarterback. And now he's going to get an opportunity to have another crack at it. And I mean, maybe it won't go any better than the last couple did, but equally, maybe Carson Wentz, like maybe this is the time where he's actually had a chance to sit for a while, develop, like whatever. But it's a really difficult situation now where you don't have time anymore to learn on the job. You have to either learn from the sideline, if that's even possible, or you just need to be good the second you get an opportunity.
The conclusion I've come to here with this situation is that everything is on the table. If you told me that next year the Vikings were starting Carson Wentz week 1, I wouldn't be surprised. If you told me that JJ McCarthy came back in the Cleveland game, lit it up, and took this team to the playoffs, I wouldn't be surprised. I think anything could happen here. So let's go over that situation though, because let's say the Vikings go 2-1 here. Wentz doesn't play all that well in these next 3 games, and then they come back. They're going to play Philly at home after the bye week, and JJ McCarthy's 100% with his ankle, and they decide, you know what, Wentz didn't play that well anyway, and let's get back to the plan with JJ McCarthy. How much should we let the Atlanta game influence what we think he can be if he comes back? I think that there's a lot to be concerned about. I also think they're without Jordan Addison and Christian Darrisaw. And if the idea is that you're going to have the most stacked offense in the NFL, well, you kind of have to have the most stacked offense in the NFL to fit the idea. So how high can we set the bar for this team if McCarthy comes back and they get back on track with what they wanted to do?
I think we definitely need to see this offense with Christian Darrisaw back in the lineup. I mean, it's tough because everyone deals with injuries and they're a part of the NFL, but the offensive line is huge. Like the drop off between an elite left tackle, which Christian Darrisaw is, wherever you want to rank him in the top left tackle conversation, he's top 5 somewhere, right? So he's one of the best left tackles in the NFL. The drop off between him and any general second team offensive lineman in the NFL is massive. And I don't think the Vikings have a particularly strong second team, offensive line either. So it's going to be about as big as it gets. You're going from, I don't have to worry about left tackle at all, I can match him up with anybody we're going to face, to anybody is a problem now. Like it is a guaranteed problem at left tackle every single snap. And that changes everything. If you want to put help towards that side, you have to, there's plays you can't call. There's entire sections of the playbook that have to get junked or adjusted. Or you say, no, look, we just run the offense and that guy's got to survive on his own, and he won't, right? And there'll be pressure coming off that side almost all the time. We've seen good NFL quarterbacks get broken by that kind of outcome. Baker Mayfield, when he had Greg Robinson as his left tackle in Cleveland, it took him half a season to just become non-functional. I mean, by halfway through the year, every snap, he was like panic rolling out to the right, regardless of what the play was, because he's like, Greg Robinson is my left tackle. There is pressure coming. I'm getting away from it. So it's the kind of problem that's big enough to destroy an offense by itself. Then you add in, no Jordan Addison still. It's your number 2 wide receiver just isn't in the lineup. Ryan Kelly goes down with a concussion. That's a problem. That's maybe your second best offensive lineman or third, but he's also the guy dealing with, blocking calls in the middle and all those kinds of things. Those are 3 of the most important players in the offense, and they're not there. So I think we have to see what it looks like with those guys in there before you can get an idea of like, what is the ceiling with JJ McCarthy? Is he, because he's a young quarterback, are his negative tendencies, pouring gas on a fire that's a problem, or are his negative tendencies a problem anyway, right? Like, is the fact that he's holding onto the ball too long, that he's sort of too slow processing right now, relatively inaccurate, just certainly not dialed in consistently, is all that a problem even when you've got a top tier left tackle and a center's there and a number 2 wide receivers there? Or is it like, it just looks catastrophic when those guys are not in the lineup?
Right. And that's the thing that I feel like we have to see is him with Darrisaw in there, because it wasn't just, oh, well, that guy can survive over there. The Vikings have had a few swing tackles over the years where you're like, okay, well, I mean, he's bad, but he's not that bad.
Right.
That is not the case with Justin School. This is TJ Clemmings level, as you said, every single snap. you should be terrified for your life because he can get beat in an instant. They talk about 2.5 seconds. I mean, some of those wins against school were just immediate, less than that. So that's not an environment for a young quarterback. That also makes me think about like this injury. And even if it is not the most serious injury of all time, you don't want him injured trying to play if Darrisaw is not going to be back and ready to go. Let me get you to give me a little pie chart action. You ever done a pie chart on the show before? No?
No.
No, you never done a pie chart? Okay. Well, you know how pie charts work, right? You worked in analytics. Okay.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the concept.
Okay. All right. So here's your 4 options for the pie chart. And for those uninitiated, it has to add up to 100%. And you give percentage chances. So four potential outcomes for the 2025 Minnesota Vikings. They get it together and they win the North and compete for a Super Bowl. They are a decent team that ends up making the playoffs, maybe 9 or 10 wins. They miss the playoffs 7 or 8. Just all this stuff adds up, doesn't work out, or it goes swirling all the way down the drain. What are the percentage chances of each one of those outcomes?
I think it probably looks, like a bell curve. I think the middle two are where most of the pie is. I would say at this point, there's like a 5% chance that they're a dominant team and they win the North in as much because the Packers look really, really good and the Lions might be very good as well, even though they stumbled out of the gate. So I just think the division's too tough for them to be that good, even if they kind of get it together. I think there's a reasonable chance that they're good and make the playoffs and are a wild card team and maybe not as good as they were a year ago, but similar outcomes because of the way that season ended. They get there and they're good, but not good enough. Sort of like last year's Green Bay team as well. I think there's maybe a slightly bigger chance now that they are not quite good enough and they don't make the playoffs because, again, Green Bay and Detroit probably should make the playoffs from that division. So you're already down a wild card spot and, battling with some other teams for that. And then I don't think it's that likely. But for a start, I think the defense is too good for them to just totally implode.
Yeah, I think so too. You didn't give exact percentages. I know maybe doing the math on the fly is a little challenging for you, but
5% that they're 5% that the top outcome, 10% the bottom one. That leaves me with, let's say, 45% for the non-playoff one. And then what am I left with? 40
for the
other one.
Yep. Okay. That's a good pie chart. That was well done. And I tend to agree with you that having seen things go this way before in other seasons, that just, it's not your year, guys, whether it's hiring the wrong offensive coordinator in 2018 or whatever it might be, or Kirk's Achilles pops in the middle of the season. Sometimes this season ain't just for you. And it feels a little more like that than it does a miracle season of Case Keenum or Sam Darnold. But I guess at the same time in 2017, they started 1-2 and we thought, are there any other quarterbacks out there that they could go get? So you never really do know with this Vikings team. Last thing for you, we've got 2 weeks of sample size around the league. So clearly we know every single thing about every team at this point. It's all locked in. The rest of the season's written. We could just simulate to the playoffs. What has been the biggest intrigue on the NFC side of things for you? Like, what's the thing over the first couple of weeks development where you've been like, oh, okay, in all those great summer shows where you did all the positive things about the teams or all the different ideas for the, whatever that you did in the summer that kind of blew up a little bit in these first couple of weeks?
I think the NFC has been less sort of surprising than the AFC has been for that. I guess the Saints have not been as bad as people were expecting them to be. Spencer Rattler could be a quarterback still. I think most people had kind of written off the idea that was a possibility. And I think honestly, the Saints had kind of written off the idea that was a possibility. I think if Tyler Shuck had shown them anything, they were trying to give him that job in training camp, preseason, and they let it drag on, so far. And they were like, okay, look, we just can't. He hasn't. So we have to give the job to Rattler. And he's looked pretty good through the first couple of weeks with a supporting cast that isn't amazing. I mean, his receivers are pretty good. Alvin Kamara is still pretty good. The offensive line is not, and he's still looking pretty good. So I guess that would be that's as surprised, I think, as I've been by anything in the NFC so far.
I guess that means that it's been very chalky then, because
Yeah, generally. I mean, Green Bay and that addition of Micah Parsons, they look pretty spectacular, but would that have been completely insane to say preseason that actually the Packers are going to take that step this year and they'll be really good? No. Like the Washington maybe looks like they're primed for regression. We kind of said that might be a thing. The West is generally a bit chaotic. So I think overall the NFC has been reasonably kind of chalky with a couple of slight outliers.
I'll throw it out there that Dallas has been a must watch for just entertainment purposes. And that I wasn't sure that I was going to expect when Brian Schottenheimer took over as their head coach. But now I kind of want to watch a lot of their football games because I think they're going to be, every single game is going to be like 38-35. They have no real defense and they have weapons on offense, and Prescott's going to throw it for 5,000 yards. And that could be kind of fun since we get national TV games with the Cowboys jammed down our throats every single week. So that's probably one of the bigger developments for me. And then I think the answer also is probably the Vikings and where this has gone in the first couple of weeks. Sam, Check the Mic podcast. I'm always checking in on Check the Mic, making sure you guys get all your pronunciations of Javon Hargrave correct. So far, I will say with Javon Hargrave, I had no idea either. I had called him Javon Hargrave. Every broadcast had said Javon for his entire career. And then he got introduced to us and we were like, oh, we didn't know that. Some guys are just quiet about it. They just don't correct anybody. And you can go a long time without knowing the pronunciation.
Yeah. I feel like they've got to get, there needs to be a time period where it's like, if you waited this long, you missed the boat. Like your name is, I'm sorry. The zeitgeist has now decided your name is something different and you didn't correct it. So that's on you.
All right. Well, I think that we should all just try our best to pronounce it the way that his parents pronounce it. But, I agree. At some point, you got to let everybody know.
But the risk with that is you end up with a Bijan Robinson, where it's like apparently his parents want to pronounce a different way. And he's like, you know what? No, I don't care. I don't like it pronounced that way. So I'm going back to what everybody else called it.
It's a complicated league, Sam. It's a complicated league. Anyway, Check the Mic podcast. Great to check in with you as always. And I'm sure none of this is a surprise to you that it is the Vikings. So we're talking about a quarterback who played for a bunch of other teams who now has a chance to turn around a season. Why not? Why not? We're all quite comfortable with this. Thanks for your time, Sam.
Anytime. We go again.
What's something that I think a young quarterback like JJ is going to
One more extension.
Hold on. Oh, whoa. That wasn't supposed to happen. Okay. Thanks everybody for watching and listening. And now the Minnesota Lynx are going to play a playoff game. So if you have the Lynx app, feel free to listen. My wife is calling the game out in San Francisco. They're playing the Golden State Valkyries. Actually, they're in San Jose for some reason tonight. But I'm going to go do that. I'm going to go listen to my wife call a playoff game and watch. I'll be watching the TV, listening to her on the app. Should be a pretty good time. And I think they're probably going to win and move on in the playoffs. And then we will be back with you tomorrow night. It is somehow only Wednesday. So we'll have more for tomorrow. And Justin Jefferson's going to talk. TJ Hawkinson will talk as well. Make sure if you haven't signed up for the newsletter as well, I had a one-on-one conversation with Walter Rouse about his first chance to play in the NFL. He could be your left tackle this week. And we had a really good conversation about what he's learned so far in the NFL. I'll be writing about that, as well as Carson Wentz and what he had to say for tomorrow, and answer that FanDuel question of the day, which was how many points does Carson Wentz need to score to win the game? The over-under is 41.5. So we'll have a lot for you. Andrew Kramer and I are recording tomorrow as well, our hardcore position-by-position breakdown. Joe Goodberry, who covers the Bengals, great guest. He's been on a few times, is going to join the show tomorrow night. So a lot coming your way. Thanks, everybody, for the great conversation again tonight. Hopefully, we will see you tomorrow as well. And as always,